Well, hello from the West Coast. John Hendrix here alongside Ross Jackson here for another episode of Second and Saints. You know why we're here. We're here to talk about Saints training camp. Obviously, we're out here in California, the beautiful California. Ross, my man, I know you're right at home. How's things going with you, man?
It's great, man. It's great, man. I'm just glad that football's back. It was cool. It was great to be out there. It's great to see football again. Great to talk to everybody. I'm like that little kid in that video that's like, I love my mom, I love my dad, I love my hair, but it's like football. That's me, like all the time. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm just trying to overcome some internet issues. You know what I'm saying? We were to go a little certain, but things happen, which obviously, you know, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button because you never know what you're going to get with Second and Saints when we go on the air. And when we try to do things, we forget how to podcast. We forget how to talk. We do all these things. And that's why you keep coming back, hopefully. So, but no, I'm good, man. It was a fun ride in. And I said that very sarcastically on the travel day. I told you about it, but, you know, I got delayed in Dallas 5 hours and I missed the press conference yesterday. And you had a fun travel day as well. But hey, we got here and we were able to see Saints training camp, which is obviously what we want to talk about here. And of course, if you guys have questions, be sure to drop them in there and we'll try to get to them. But Ross, let's jump into the big ones, right?
Yeah.
I don't know which one I want to do for the big one. There's two big ones that I think we should talk about. Let's talk about Alvin Kamara first. Yes. He was at training camp. He was going to be at training camp. I thought his interview was very interesting. Alvin's always like an even keel. He tells you like it is. Yeah. I mean, if you ever want a pulse on where the Saints are at, the Saints locker room, he's going to like it. Like he said last year, we don't have an identity. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that honesty, that raw honesty from him. But, you know, talking that he was planning to be here. He said he didn't even know what the fines were for missing training camp. But, you know, showing that he was here for the team. Made some interesting comments about, you know, there's really been no talks or anything, and it's been crickets. We said that, you know, not that long ago, but, you know, he was there. He was participating. He's here, bought in, obviously. He's going to be playing. And then, like we've talked about, Ross, the issue's not here. It's next year, which is something that you asked specifically. So Alvin Kamara being here day one and being involved and active was one of the biggest storylines. Talk about what you saw from Alvin and really kind of your thoughts about his interview.
Yeah, I mean, I thought his interview, I thought he was brilliant. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. I thought that this was so refreshing to see in the midst of these situations where somebody could posture, somebody could employ a lot of public negotiation tactics and things like that. This is a dude that could be doing what other players around the NFL are doing, so they're holding out or they're holding in and all these other things. And instead, he's out there just working. And getting it done. And that's something that I think is just spectacular for him because he very well could have just gone down the road of not participating, not being present, all the other stuff. But instead, he's out there, he's working, he's getting things done with this team. And I think that that's just it. Look, if you're going to sit there and like be in a situation to where you're going, hey, I am trying to get more money for my future. I'm trying to get a commitment from this team, all of those stuff. A good way to do that is to show up and work. And that's exactly what Alvin Kamara did. I really appreciated it. And I appreciated the honesty of his answers beyond just his conversations around his contract, but also his conversations around, you know, what were the issues that were plaguing this team in the past and how those things have gotten better going into this year so far in terms of what he's seen. So I just thought that the honesty was absolutely there from him. And it was refreshing to see. What was a big takeaway for you?
Yeah, and those who haven't seen it, I made sure we put up all the interviews from today. Cam, Derek Carr, Alvin, and then obviously be able to see all of that stuff. But, you know, I think for me, really what I've appreciated about Alvin was that honesty about where things were at and the way he was talking about it. And one of the things that came to mind for me was how it was when Drew was around and how Sean was around. And what he talked about was, you know, people he didn't call out anybody by name, but he's like, if you fumbled in a game, you've been doing that in practice and nobody tells you anything, and then you do it in a game, there's no repercussion from it. You know what I'm saying? And so like that's the brutal honesty that I appreciate, is the fact that he can go in there and kind of give us a peek behind the curtain. And I mean, some of those issues I think we kind of know, but this is a team that has said accountability is something they need to have. And he also talked about Clint Kubiak, the attention to details, the fact that he's on it, that, and even Derek Carr said, is like, I could throw a pass perfectly, but then Clint's going to come back and say, you didn't really do it the way that I wanted you to do it and stuff. And then I think that's the difference here, is that we're seeing, early on, that it does maybe look good on the surface, but is it really? You know what I mean? But that's the type of mentality. Yeah. And that's the big difference, is the new coaching staff has injected a different type of authority here. And you're seeing kind of the fruits here and I get it. Everybody, when training camp starts, it's all rah. Everybody's on a high. Everybody win the Super Bowl. But the Saints are a team where they've got a lot of pressure on them to deliver. And I think Alvin, with what his comments made, doesn't just say the service. It just is kind of like what Cam said, is I could sit here and say it, but I need to go show it, right? Like about his age and stuff like that. And I think it's the same thing for everybody in that building, is they got to go show it.
100%. I thought one of the other things that was really interesting about Kamara's conversation too was him making the case against himself in his contract negotiations. He was talking about like how, people are going to talk about the age and all these other things. He said, look, my bones don't hurt. My muscles don't hurt. Right. My legs still work. He said he thinks he still has it in him, but he was kind of making it known like, hey, look, I understand the case against me. He even went into talking about the lack of production per his standards, his own standards over the course of the past 2 seasons, which I think it's viable to say over the past 3 seasons, right? You saw the big drop in terms of yards per carry, drop sub 4 yards over the course of the past 3 years, things like that. And a lot of that's just play calling, how he was utilized, what he's being asked to do, all that other stuff. But he's aware that a lot of that's going to be turned around and turned back to evaluate him, everything. So it was so interesting to hear both of those guys just have very realistic understandings and a very realistic expectation in terms of what it is that they're there to achieve, what it is that they're there to pull off, what they have to do to get things going. And I thought that was pretty refreshing as well. Because a lot of times when you're in these, especially a guy like Kamara who's in this contract negotiation conversation, a lot of these guys just want to pass the buck. Yeah, it's sure. It's on the organization. Like, I don't know, like we're doing everything we need to do, blah, 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 and all this stuff, and kind of posturing and, going on podcasts and doing all this other stuff and getting wild on social media and whatever. And, AK's having his typical fun, posting pictures of himself and Marshawn Lynch, who of course is famous for the phrase, or not famous for the phrase. He's famous for a lot of different reasons, but famously uttered the phrase, I'm just here so I don't get fined. But then at the same time, he walks out there and he's a full participant in training camp. I mean, he did everything. He was, right. And everything, and talked to us. And so like that to me shows you like a very realistic understanding of a lot of things that can be true all at the same time. The relationship that's developed between the player and the team, the relationship that's developed between the player and the fan. The relationships can be meaningful. But the business can be the business, and all those things can be true at the same time. And I think seeing a really good understanding of that practice and that truth just completely outlined the way that it was, I thought that was refreshing.
And I remember when I was writing about Kamara, like pitching his contract extension, and we talked about it. It's not this year, it's next year, because he's got $30 million in the books that he's not going to see. Right. It's just, it's not going to happen. But, it's interesting because there are plenty of running backs who have had success just despite age. I mean, Adrian Peterson is one we've talked about on this show. Pointed him out. Raheem Mostert last year. I mean, there's so many different examples that you can find over the last 10 years. So I don't think it's a death sentence. And, look, I think when you look at Alvin, he's only had one real major injury. And I think that was 2019 against Jacksonville when it had the MCL scare, I think is what it was. But I mean, again, I think his usage is on the uptick for sure. Especially some of the other, that was the other big topic. We'll get into that in a second. But, for him, I think it's interesting because if the Saints don't get something done with him, before the season starts and he blows up, then he's going to have the negotiation chip when it's all said and done. Is like, okay,
yeah,
you didn't pay me when you had the chance. Now that price tag is going to go up a lot more. And so I think the Saints are in a really interesting space here, because if Kamara does return form and he shows that he is worth being paid, now you're going to have to pay him even more. And so, and again, he said it's between the front office. He also said some comments about, that they thought certain things were supposed to happen and they didn't happen. So there's definitely some, I guess I would say, friction there. You can read between the lines between what him and what Mickey has said. And, look, they got to work that out and time will tell, but he's here and we've seen players get contract extensions right before week 1. So it's not impossible for Kamara to still get paid. It's just, what does that look like? What's going to make both parties happy? And again, this is a commitment to Kamara to make sure that he's in the plans for next year, which, again, we can keep talking about Kendre Miller, man, getting off the field with a hamstring injury. Dennis Allen saying a very poignant comment about a guy that cannot make the roster if he stays in the training room. This is a guy we thought was going to have a huge, huge season, but this is not a good start for Kendre Miller, and this is a big bargaining chip for Kamara right now.
Big time. I mean, that could not have lined up in a way that's more impactful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Dennis Allen, like, just shooting that shot across the bow to let everybody know, like, where that was. Like, that was big. In case you missed it, Kendre Miller left practice today on Wednesday with a hamstring injury. We don't know the significance of the hamstring injury at this time, but this is another injury for Kendre Miller. These have started to pile up. And when Dennis Allen was asked about it, well, when I asked Dennis Allen about injuries, he kind of went into it and just kind of went into it on his own. And he mentioned, he said something to the effect of, like, look, when it comes to Kendre Miller, he's the guy that's got to figure out a way to stay healthy. And it's hard to make a team if you can't stay on the field. Not it's hard to jostle for position. Not it's hard to fight for snaps. Not it's hard to make an impression. It's hard to make the team. And this is the difference between having patience with one player in the draft that you drafted in the first round and having patience with another player you drafted in the draft in the third round. You don't have to have the same level of patience with those two players. And boy, I thought that was loud. That was loud, especially coming from DA, who's not typically that guy. You know what I mean? Yeah. But yeah, I thought that was something else. And so it'll be interesting because here's the other thing. John, you and I have been talking about Jordan Mims. We've been talking about him like crazy. If Kendre Miller, if Kendre Miller misses time, which look, it could be out of his control at this point, that's going to open the door wide open for 3-3, and he still looks good, like, consistently in practices.
Yeah. And the thing about, it was in individual drills. It wasn't like team setting or anything. It was doing
good point.
Drills. And that's tough. Like, that's really hard. And so we talked about Jordan Mims, and look, everybody benefits from him. James Robinson now, and then undrafted rookie Jacob Bode. Now they're going to get more reps, and even Jamal Williams could benefit a little bit here. But hamstrings are tricky. You know what I mean? I remember Mike Thomas going so hard that he had a hamstring injury, and of course, because he was going at 110. You know what I'm saying? But there is a thing where that could be a very tricky one. I don't soft tissue, whatever you want to put it and chalk it up to. That you're looking at a space where this is probably going to put him out for a little bit. I'm saying, of course, we don't know the severity of it, but by tomorrow we're going to know, because everybody was out there. If you weren't out there today, you better have had a good reason. And for him, it's unfortunate. And I've seen it on social media. I've seen the people was like, this is why you should have took Tyjae Spears. This is why you should have took Deche. And it's hindsight, right? Because
it's all hindsight.
Going into last year at the end of the season, at the end of the season, Kendre looked fantastic, and he could have been the guy that is the future. And look, he still can, but a second-year player being available versus a guy who can steadily be available and can learn the depth chart or learn the playbook and climb up the depth chart, like a Jordan Mims. And of course, there's free agents out there that look at as well. But not a good start for Kendre Miller on a guy who really needs is going to be bet on to be a bigger part of this offense. It's just not a good look.
Big time. Yep. Yeah. Man. That's tough. That's really, really tough.
And
I have a list of some. Yeah, I have a list of some free agent running backs. If you want to hear some folks that are particularly, I got a couple that are particularly interesting. If I'm being real,
okay.
So the Saints could, if they wanted to, go back to Kareem Hunt. They tried this last year, everything. Almost brought him in, then he didn't show up. Maybe that left a sour taste in their mouth, whatever it might be. But Kareem Hunt's available. Two guys that have excelled in these wide zone offenses, Matt Breida as well as Jerick McKinnon. Both of those guys. In fact, Jamal Williams talked about Jerick McKinnon. Remember that? He was talking about watching Jerick McKinnon tear it up for the San Francisco 49ers. They're in a playoff team going, man, I want to do that. Everything. So could be a fit. Saints could potentially go back to Eno Benjamin. Is another guy that's out there. And one other reunion they could potentially go with as well is Latavius Murray, who's currently out there. But man, I'll tell you what, guys like Matt Breida, guys like Kareem Hunt, guys like Jerick McKinnon, I know they've had their, and even a guy like Marlon Mack, I know they have had their injury question marks in the past themselves. But if you're just looking for another guy to come in and compete, those are guys that have shown that they can make stuff happen in a system that exactly the system that the New Orleans Saints are trying to install with that wide zone influence.
Yeah, I like McKinnon personally. I mean, Kareem Hunt would make sense, right? I think, you know, with Chubb out in Cleveland, there was first it worked a little bit of times, but when you got Chubb doing what he was doing, it was no point in having him really around. I mean, Chubb could do everything, right? And so again, it'll be fascinating to see. But if it's something that lingers, from more than a week, I think they might have to look at options there. And of course, this begs the question too, is now that we talked about it, that, Alvin could be, anywhere from the 50 to 60% range. Maybe it's a little bit less. And we thought that Kendre could maybe be 20% of the snaps on offense. But if you can't stay available and can't stay healthy, that's got to go to somebody else right now. But that's a really unfortunate, injury from the get-go, and not a good start for a guy who has been around and thought the injury bug was kind of behind him. But, I mean, he wasn't the only one. We saw Justin Herron leave early too. A minor knee injury is what we were told at first, but he's another guy that's
the initial. He was real clear about that. He was like, the initial look is that it's not anything to do with. Yeah, I mean, I love that. Yeah, so let's see if they dig into it a little bit more. But yes, it didn't look like, at least initially, it was anything too bad. One guy that wasn't on that list for whatever reason, but I should bring up too, is Leonard Fournette.
I was about to say Leonard was the one I saw on social media.
Yeah, maybe it's Damian Harris is another one. Maybe it's the LSU Tiger in me or whatever. You know what I mean? But they're there. They're there.
And they're going to get calls. They're going to get workouts. They're going to probably do things. I mean, that'll be the thing, is like, if the Saints feel like they're in a need, they're going to start putting calls on there and start working out people, get a short list together of who the guys they want to have out there. But again, I think they're going to probably see where things are at right now. But, day one of training camp, you're getting hurt with a hamstring. That's not a good. And so it's a thing, and we'll see if it's a bigger thing or if it's not a big thing. And I hate that for them, but at the same time, this is the type of thing. You got to take care of your body. You got to be able to be available, and to get called out by the head coach that way. I mean, you're right. I don't know if DA's like kind of throwing somebody under the bus that hard. Right. And look, we've talked about what's different with him and how he's been. That's probably what he needs to do. Like, is enough of coddling, and I'm not saying he was coddling people, but like, enough with it. Like Sean Payton, when he was here, if you were in the doghouse, you knew the player was in the doghouse. And DA, that's a pretty big indication that Kendre Miller obviously now is in the doghouse, and you got to get yourself out of it. And so we will see.
Yeah, man. And I feel like that happened right before Alvin Kamara came out and talked about how the accountability is different now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like those two things are tied together, man. Like, I didn't expect DA to do that. That for me was like, oh dang. He looked dead at me. I felt like he was talking about me. He looked dead at me when he said that. And I was like, me, coach? I didn't.
Who knows? Maybe. You never know. I know when Sean sometimes would look at you, you felt like, oh crap, maybe I was the one who made a mistake or something. So
am I
yeah,
in
get those
trouble?
looks. Yeah, man.
No, it's
Man.
good. Like that's coaching, right? Like that's a big part of
That's
it.
what
So it was
you
cool. It was
want
refreshing to see.
That is
Yeah.
what you want to see. Like if you're trying to
Yep.
say, okay, prove to me, show me that this team is different and they're not going to do the same thing that they always do. That's a pretty decent example to start, right? Like, I mean, obviously they got to play on the field. We've seen the stuff on the offense, which again, motion. Like I wrote about it on my recap from today, is that the first 5 plays Derek Carr ran a team, 4 of them had motion on it. You know what I mean? Like this is the staple that we're going to see that continues. And so I don't know. It's an interesting day. And look, we only got to see an hour and a half of it, so everybody knows, because the NFL rules, it was only for a small window, right. So they didn't do like 7s. They did 15 periods. They gave Derek Carr obviously the bulk of the reps. Hayner and Spencer Rattler got even reps. Hayner was ahead of Rattler, and Nathan Peterman had some reps too. But I think, guess where we go from here is attendance wise. Again, everybody was out there. We did see Juwan Johnson kind of towards the end. He wasn't in a walking boot, so that's a positive thing, but he's not anywhere close to being ready, so that's a good sign. It also saw Tano out there, which is a good sign. And of course, he's just kind of getting agile. He doesn't have a walking boot, and he's going to be a lot longer of a wait, a recovery. But good to see those two out there. The only one I didn't see was Nephi Sewell, but everybody else there and accounted for. And of course, this is a day where, like, if you weren't there, if you weren't like on the pup and you weren't there, then there would have been a big problem. But Chase Young, as Mickey Loomis kind of and Dennis Allen, they kind of alluded to, was going to be out there. Who's there in walkthroughs opposite of Peyton Turner for the second team defense and such. But seeing him out there getting acclimated, and everything that we told you during the past several weeks is that everything was on the uptick. I think it was back at minicamp we said that his prognosis looked good, and so it's good to see him out there as well. And I'll tell you another one that I was really excited to see, because I know you honed in on the offense, but defensively, I honed in on 2 people, Demario Davis and Kool-Aid McKinstry. And I really liked the fluidity McKinstry had, and I love the attitude Marshawn Lattimore had. Like, those 2 things, I just specifically focused in on those guys. Like, and I looked at everything, but just seeing those 2, man, if they get Marshawn where he needs to be and get McKinstry, wrote about it, like it's going to make the secondary so good. And so it was good. But, any attendance you saw, anything that stood out for you?
Yeah, I got a couple things from over on the offense. I do want to say I think the Saints might have, if Kool-Aid McKinstry is as good as we think he's going to be, I think they have the deepest cornerback room in the NFL. Like having those 4, having those 4 starting caliber corners is just, it's nuts. It's crazy.
Redonkulous. Yeah.
Wild. Should be outlawed. I got a couple things from over on the offensive side. So John and I, basically, just so that you know, basically the way that this works is there's 2 fields. And so before they come together to do team drills, they'll send, offense will go and do position drills on one field, and defense will go and do position drills on the other field. So today or on Wednesday, John stuck with the defense and then I stuck with the offense. And so we'll typically do that, and then maybe swap off every now and then and things like that. But here's the things that I found interesting watching the offensive drills. So we saw Taysom Hill go out there and during walkthroughs and team drills and stuff like that, play running back, play wide receiver, play tight end, all those other things. But he spent most of his time during the individual drills with the fullback. So it was him, Xander Horvath, as well as Adam Prentice doing blocking drills and taking on a sled and all this other stuff. So it was cool to see that. So that was interesting to watch, because he typically, when he goes to a position group, he'll typically either go to tight end, more, which is mostly what we see, quarterback, or running back. But this time, him specifically sectioned off with the other 2 fullbacks was of note. The Saints also split up offensive line, not just interior and tackle, but they actually split up a group of right tackles and a group of left tackles. The group of right tackles to me was noticeable, John, because it was Trevor Penning, Ali Udoh, and Josiah Ziram. Landon Young was working with the left tackles. I'm really curious to see if they do that again throughout the week, how does Landon Young move over to right? Because we saw him play right tackle, left tackle. I think he did some work with interior and stuff like that. Like he's looking like the new James Hurst. He's looking like the guy that's going to be that dude that can play outside, inside. You can kind of move around, all that kind of stuff. And he's incredibly intelligent, as we always say. So he has the ability to do all that. So I thought that was really interesting because Ali Udoh has kind of been my little sleeper pick over at right tackle if Trevor Penning struggles to be the guy that could potentially step in and hold down that role. He was a natural tackle during his time at anybody, Elon University. Good job. But ended up playing on the interior during his 2021 season with Clint Kubiak in Minnesota. So could he potentially get back to the outside? Because everything that I heard from folks that covered him in Minnesota that I talked to was that they felt that he was playing out of position, but playing on the interior. And so could you potentially get him back on the outside? And that's what we saw day one. So those were two big notes that I saw. And then I do want to mention too, Chris Olave, not in a non-contact jersey, which is how he ended. Not ended. That's how he lived throughout mandatory minicamps. And if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm right, John, or correct me if I'm right. Confirm if I'm correct. Tell me more about me being right. No, but correct me if I'm wrong. But that was a shoulder thing from like a weight room or something like that. I feel like I remember. Yeah. But then Dennis Allen said on Tuesday that it was a back injury, back tweak,
back
kind of
tightness.
A thing. Yeah. Tightness. And so I was wondering if he was going to be in the red non-contact jersey because it was a different injury, but he was not. And I know DA said that he was going to be limited, but it didn't feel like he was uncomfortable in any way. And he was out there during all those first team snaps. He might have rotated a little bit because the Saints have a lot of wide receivers that they're rotating right now, especially with, the addition of Kevin Austin. And then and then Stanley Morgan Jr. made his debut today. Then they had all these other guys. Like there's a ton of players there at that position, but I didn't feel like he got rotated out any more than usual. Like the Saints were pretty much, here's the first team, here's the second team, here's the third team, with very little movement off of that. So those are some of my offensive takeaways for sure.
Definitely.
And the new running back drill.
You were talking
the
about
new
that.
running back drill. I love this. So basically the Saints have these, I think they just call them gates, but basically all that it is like, if you could think about like a hockey net, but instead of it being, wide, it's kind of slim. So basically the way that it's just kind of like an arc, like a little arc, like arced pipe, basically. So they took 3 of those to mimic gaps, basically, in the run game. And so what they would do was they had a running back with the ball that would run full speed at these 3 gaps. And then 2 coaches would fill 2 gaps. And then that meant that the running back had to read and react to that without hesitation and then move to the gap that they were supposed to attack. So it's a little bit of like an inside zone drill almost, to where, these gaps are kind of moving in front of you and changing and things like that. So how do you react to all of that? So I thought that was really cool too. So that would be my other one. That's all Derek Foster, a new thing that he brought in.
Yeah, I think that's also fun to see, like, because you wrote about like Keith Williams using the rugby balls, like with new coaches, you see new concepts, new things of why they do certain things, and so that's kind of cool to see. I was saying on Oli Udoh, one of the things too that DA had talked about was before we got out of minicamp was the fact that he saw that he could potentially compete at left guard with Nick Saldiveri, for that spot, which is interesting. But, I saw Landon on the left side when he were doing, team drills and stuff. And I was like, okay, that's interesting because he's normally a right tackle, but he's played at both. He played blind side. He started there. I think it was the Eagles game that he had played there and started there. And so Oli Udoh is capable. And again, he was one that was, he didn't really participate and do anything in the team's setting in minicamp. And of course, the biggest takeaway is that the offensive linemen, like John Benton said, that they're all running around in their underwear anyways, right? And so now this is the point where, you want to see your offensive line come together. And like, I think when we looked at some of the team, just talking about the offensive line, we saw a really good rep with Trevor Penning on Carl Granderson. Then we saw him get beat by Isaiah Foskey, and he was holding. Trevor Penning was holding, and so still maybe not a completely refined, part there. And of course, we'll know a lot more when the pads come on. But offensive line definitely has some interesting, wrinkles that can be there for this team, and I think that there's some potential sleepers there, I guess you could say. But the fact remains is Nick Saldiveri still at your left guard, and you had Taliesin Fawonga at right tackle. I'm sorry, left tackle.
Or
And
left
then you
tackle,
had,
yeah.
yeah, left tackle, and then pinning at right tackle. So nothing had changed there from what we saw at minicamp. So again, I think that's interesting that Saldivary's still there at left guard, and I do know that they believe a lot in him. But again, seeing it again, maybe there's something to that. But I think these veterans are going to push him when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think so too. It's going to be interesting to watch that battle and everything. And then look, I think you mentioned this, but I love Dennis Allen's quote from I love Dennis Allen's quote from Tuesday, where he was basically saying like, "Oh, we have two incumbents on the offensive line, Eric McCoy and Cesar Ruiz, and then there's a lot of opportunity up for grabs, like a lot of competition there." And so here he is again. He's just driving competition. And this isn't new. Like when they drafted Alante Taylor, he said the same thing, right? When they signed Janoris Jenkins, it was about pushing competition. When they drafted Paulson Adebo, it was about competition, all this other stuff. So this is consistent with what it is that they've wanted to do. But I just think that they're achieving it at a more it's almost like more in your face all of a sudden right now. It's just like competition.
Yeah.
And they say competition breeds excellence. And so we'll see how it goes. I don't know about all that yet, but we'll see.
Yeah, hopefully it's a good thing. We'll see this question. Jerry asked about Chase Young. I mean, again, just kind of easing him in, right? They're doing the ramp up period. So again, does he look in shape? Yeah, he looks good.
Dude.
As far as how he looks probably better than just in shape. Like he looks like a chunk. Right? Like
bro,
a chunk and a half.
It's crazy. I didn't realize that he was that big. Like I thought of him as kind of being like in that, like typical sort of like, thing. But like that dude is yes, exactly. Prototypical. Like it's crazy. Like I get it. You know what I mean? I see that and I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. That's a Saints defensive end right there. Like that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, for sure. I look forward to seeing when he's actually unleashed and can do more. And
I'm curious to see what his ramp up process is going to be. I'm really curious to see like how quickly it's going to move or how slowly they're going to take it. Because I feel like they advanced Kool-Aid McKinstry pretty quickly in those 3 minicamp practices, right? And then I know he had a month before he had to show up at training camp and everything like that. So I'm not gonna bridge that gap. But he was kind of out there. Then he did some individual drills, and they had him kind of running around. And then all of a sudden, he was doing all the individual drills. And then so with Chase Young doing a walkthrough and a little bit of individual drills, I'm curious, like, does he do all the individual drills tomorrow? And then do they start to get him like mixed in with team drills a little bit and then get him out there? I'm really, really interested in how they ramp him up.
Yeah, for sure. There's 3 other things I want to touch on defensively. And of course, I could have talked about them earlier, but just some things that I saw, right? The first thing was Alante Taylor was coaching up like Kool-Aid McKinstry, since we were talking about McKinstry, just kind of just the fact that like just kind of some one-on-one time. It wasn't nothing like I'd say just awe-inspiring, you know what I mean? Just the fact that he was kind of teaching him some things. I thought that was really big of Alante, you know what I mean? Because this is a guy who could potentially take your job, right? You know what I'm saying? But Alante, just being able to give him some pointers and stuff. So I thought that was really interesting. The second thing was them doing up downs, the defense. Like Dennis Allen said, he's been doing this forever. I ain't seen it at a training camp. I got to be honest.
Yeah, that was new for me too.
Camp I've seen it. He almost did 2 minutes full of up downs for the defense. And I was like, man, I would have puked probably after the first like 5 seconds or something, and I just couldn't do it. But it was interesting because after the up downs, that was the second thing. But after that, Cam Jordan pulled the entire defense together and kind of gave him like this big motivational speech. And I didn't hear exactly everything that was said because Vantage Point, which has been great. You know what I'm saying? We were able to see a lot.
Oh my goodness.
Just bringing the defense together kind of set the tone for them. I thought that was really cool. And something, again, 2 things that I didn't see last year, or actually 3 things I didn't see last year that I saw this year on just the first day, which gets me excited personally.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. I think that's a part of it. It all ties right back to what we were talking about earlier with Alvin Kamara, that like things are just different. One of my other things that I wanted to highlight from Alvin Kamara's conversation too, while we're on that, was him talking about the accountability of previous years. And one of the things that he said stuck with me big time. He said, typically he said something along the lines of like, typically like when things aren't going right, or when, I'm paraphrasing, but like when things aren't going right, or you're losing games, whatever it was, but like when things aren't going right, people tend to disappear. And then he goes, and a lot of people disappeared. And that was like real talk. And so I think that like the team sees that too, right? Like, oh, they were willing to make changes and everything. And then you get these things that all are driving the competition, but building the culture, right? Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry in a competition, but Alontae Taylor is still helping Kool-Aid McKinstry along, right? Yeah. They're doing these up downs, drive. Cam's pulling everybody in, and then like have the team leader do something too, and everything. Like it's just it feels different. And I'll say too, like the vibe was different out there as well. Like we've talked about that from OTAs and minicamp and stuff like that, about how it was a little bit more intense and everything. And I think Wednesday maybe didn't have the same intensity because it was kind of, it's first practice. You can only do so much. You're only allowed to do so much, all this other stuff, acclimation period, blah, 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 and all that. But you could still feel the focus, I think, was the big thing. Like if I had to give one word to it, it would be focus. And I thought that to me was like a welcome sight to see. Offensive scheme wise, like you mentioned, a lot of motion, a lot of play action. Those things did not go away. Those things did not disappear. That has not changed. Those are all, that's still a part of what's very clearly going to be this team's DNA. And so I really enjoyed seeing that. We even saw, I think the play of the day on offense was Nathan Peterman. Yeah, I said it. Was Nathan Peterman on a drop back. It really was, right? Play action pass, right sideline to A.T. Perry on the comeback. Like nice completion, nice hookup. It was the longest completion of the day. And, I thought that was just one of those things like, okay, well, if you can execute that, your fourth quarterback down, if you can execute that, your third team down. And of course, A.T. Perry is not somebody I would consider a third teamer, like, so he's operating with another talent level. But I think when you can execute all that so cleanly and you have that mechanism available to you, or you can see the kind of oiled machine that it was, it just felt like the timing and everything was all there for that. So I like that. Yep. And I think we saw 2 screen passes today. Am I crazy?
Yeah. And with Kamara going in motion on one of them, they didn't really work, but one of them didn't work for sure. It was the one where Kamara goes in motion to the right, and that was blown up. I think it was Granderson and Willie Gay Jr. Willie Gay Jr. had a really good practice. Like this dude, I mean, we've kind of hyped him up a little bit, but if they get him and he's playing significant snaps, I don't know that he's going to take like Pete Warner's job in nickel or anything like that. But we've talked about the potential of them playing more base because of what Willie Gay Jr. brings to the table. It'll be fascinating to see, but he was all over the field today. I put him at several points. Carl Granderson was another one I had that was all over the field. We saw it with guys like Christian Boyd again making impacts in the run department. Isaiah Foskey getting into it. Anthony Orgier had a couple of good plays. I mean, these are Jalen Ford getting some work with the first team. I mean, you're seeing a couple of different wrinkles, and everybody wants to know about everybody, how they do, what they do, and some players are going to stand out more than others, right? I mean, it depends on what's going to happen for that day. I tell you, I can't wait to see one-on-ones when that happens. That'll be really entertaining for me. But, it was just other things that you see the tempo, and you see the difference in how things just move. I mean, it is very noticeable as compared to other camps that this is different. And again, we've said this, we're not trying to sell you a false bag, because we're not telling you to eat the cheese, because it can all look good here, and then they go, wet the bed week 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's the same type of thing, right? And again, I think fans are right to be cautious, but at the same time, from what we see, it is different, which is a good start. It's a good sign. Yeah.
If you were looking for change, you got change. And then now we just have to see if that change produces better, produces more wins, all those other things. My 2 standout players today were Willie Gay and Demario Davis. I mean, Demario Davis had a pick 6. Yeah, Demario Davis had a pick 6. So, that helps. That helps. I don't think that this was, I mean, I get the idea of like, look, you don't want to like put too much stock in interceptions at this time during training camp and all this stuff. People are learning timing. You're probably trying things that you wouldn't otherwise try in games and all that. But I think you still have the opportunity to celebrate the defense for making a good play. And for me, I celebrate Demario Davis for making a good play. He's prowling over the middle. Derek Carr drops back. He goes to target Rashid Shaheed over the middle of the field. And then, those interceptions that Drew Brees would throw sometimes where it looked like he just didn't see the linebacker in the middle of the field and everything. It was like that. And Demario ended up getting that interception, lurking in the middle of the field, and then housed it for what would have been a pick six.
I'd give it a pick six.
And it was, yeah, and it's just one of those, just cool. Like you saw the whole defense celebrate. You saw everybody cut up, everybody yelling, run into the end zone and everything like that. Like this is training camp, first day of training camp, and they're celebrating like they just got a pick six in a game and all this stuff like that. That's I think one of those moments where you can say, okay, things definitely feel like different, jovial, focused, intense, all that other stuff. And so that was cool to see.
Yeah, this is funny. Mitchell says, I wonder who'd win if Demario and Boyd have a bench off party, because Christian Boyd did 37 and Demario did 35. Demario is still in fantastic shape. I'll just say that.
It's insane.
So, I don't know if he's going to beat out Christian Boyd because he's a hoss and a half, but I don't know. That would be kind of fun to see for sure. But man, but yeah, the Demario play, dude. And the cool thing to appreciate too is Pete Warner was right there as well. Which again, we talked about Pete Warner. Some of the biggest problems was the coverage last year, and for him to be in the right position, whether that was by design or just happened to be that way, that was also a good sign for me too, just to see him there. And so, look, aside the A.T. Perry play, I think the Saints defense played pretty well. Which again, everybody knows these plays are somewhat scripted in some aspect, and it's the first day, so we're not going to sit and say that Saints defense is going to be top 5. They're going to carry them to the Super Bowl, all that craziness and stuff. But a good showing from the Saints defense overall, I think for sure. And the offense is going to catch up to them, and things are going to change up. But again, some of these guys that we've talked about, that I said, like the Foskies, or that are starting to make some plays here, that's a good sign for this defense. And you only hope it continues, and for their sake, is if Foskey can be available and he can cut it loose like Dennis Allen has said that he needs to do, it's only going to make this defense better. And guys like Pete Warner being better in coverage. You got to see Jordan Howden play in the team atmosphere. Just all these guys, it's going to be super hard when it comes to roster cuts. And these practice reps are meaningful. Preseason is going to be meaningful. And if it shapes out like the way we think it is going to be really tough when it's time for final cuts.
Yeah, big time. It's going to be, but that's what you want, right? You want that competition, and you want to see the cream rise to the top, and that's exactly what you're going to see from this. It's worth noting that typically defenses start out stronger in training camps than offenses do, especially offenses that are installing new systems and stuff like that. So it's not entirely out of the ordinary to see the defense thrive a little bit early. And so, that's worth noting. The other thing that's worth noting as well is that I thought that we saw a lot of back and forth between the offensive line and the defensive line. And that's what you want to see. I don't think you want to see one dominate the other. That's typically not good news about the one that's being dominated, but it's nice to see kind of the back and forth. And I felt like we saw pretty good back and forth. We would see Trevor Penning look really good on a rep. We saw Xander Horvath had a fantastic pickup at one point. We saw Eric McCoy get into the second level and all this other stuff. We saw another really good block from, who was it? Oh, from Taliesin Fuanga. And so we saw all that kind of stuff. But then we also saw Carl Granderson, Trajan Jeffcoat at one point got a pressure. We saw who was it that had the batted pass? One of Rattler's
Nico Lalos had one.
Nico Lalos. Yeah, Lalos had one. And stuff like that. So like, it was cool to see. It's good to see that. That's what you want to see. You want to see a lot of the back and forth.
Absolutely, for sure. And we only look forward to seeing it more. I want to pull this one up just because, I know it's a topic, I know it's a thing, but really Patrick says that he's from New Orleans. He's working in California, about an hour away, doing chemo. So he's off work. We wish you a speedy recovery with that for sure.
Yes, man.
Talking about lunch from contingent, I imagine he's here, and if he brings up later, he's talking about a live podcast for the fans, which that was what I wanted to talk about. If you hadn't tuned into live shows, I did make that announcement. We do plan on doing a live show out in Fullerton, California on August 8th. I believe that's the date. I got to lock down the times. I think it was like 4 to 6 or 5 to 7, something like that. But it's going to be at the Bourbon Street Bar and Grill over in Fullerton. That's the plan. So we're going to send out all the information for you guys. I've got everything set up from FOCO. They're going to be sponsoring our show. They're going to be giving away a lot of cool stuff. And so stay tuned for that. But I just want to let you guys know, I know SoCal, no fans. That's a bummer. We found out some things. I don't know if I should share, but we don't even have a space to work right now. We don't have a space because I don't think UC Irvine has been that accommodating for some things. And of course,
it's not the Saints' fault. It's not the Saints' fault.
And I'm not trying to sound like I'm defending them, but like just to tell you, we don't even have a space to work right now. And so that's kind of how crazy it is. But anyways, live show, that's what we're planning for the SoCal contingent of Saints fans. And so hopefully you guys come. Hopefully you pack out that place. I think it'll be a lot better than we're thinking maybe. And we don't really know what we're doing probably, but we're going to just wing it like we always do and just have fun. We ain't here for like some premier production and stuff, but we're just here to have fun.
We're going to have fun.
trade war stories and all that fun stuff. And so it'll be a great time. At least come meet Ross and I, if anything. And of course, we're having a good time in California already. I've enjoyed it, man. I told you without, just getting back, detracting from Saint stuff. Just the drive on the 405, right? Because
there you go.
I was talking to a Cali
there you go.
person just said, we don't call it like I-405 or anything because I call it like I-10 or 610 or something. She's like, it's the 405, it's the 5 and stuff. And so I was on the 405 and I just got this mountainous landscape there. And I'm like, oh my God, I could just get used to it because I come from trees, grass, swamp.
It's crazy seeing like elevation, right? Like, it's wild. I still because I did the majority of my mature driving here in California, and so I learned like the 405, the 5, the 55, the 73, all that kind of stuff. And so still in New Orleans, I'll still call it the 10, the 610, all that. I still call it the 45 when I'm driving up to Arkansas to visit family and everything like that. So that's all that stuff.
You're Ocho Cinco? You didn't tell me you're Ocho Cinco.
Oh, probably because of my bald head.
Maybe, you never know. Numbers don't lie. I asked about Saints 49ers joint practice being open. We haven't heard anything. As far as I know, everything is just closed to the public.
Yeah,
I know that's
and until they get back to New Orleans, and then they have those two.
The two, right? Yeah. But it's unfortunate. But I don't make the rules in the NFL, like all these things, and I get it because the Raiders are experiencing this too because they can't advertise that they're there. And I was reading that entire article, and it's like pretty nuts. But again, the big thing is the Saints. I'm sorry, but the big thing is that they're coming back to New Orleans. We've kind of said that too. Is that this is just a 1 year thing. So next year they should get back in New Orleans.
Yep.
What were you saying?
I was just gonna say that the NFL's rule is stupid. That's all. I was just gonna be inflammatory. Don't worry about me.
No, it's okay. It's okay to ridicule the NFL. I mean, it's not like they're perfect.
I do it all the time.
We stress player safety, but we don't do anything about it. And we talk about the integrity of the game, and you can't even get that right. So. I mean, let me get off my soapbox because everybody knows what I'm talking about. There's plenty
but hey, we get 18 games, All right.
We're about to, right? That's the thing. 18 games coming, and I mean, again, we talked about that the other week. If they go with Joe Burrow's idea, I think that's kind of smart, in my opinion.
I'd be down with that.
Extra bye weeks. You got to have extra roster spaces. You got to have more people active. We've talked about this before. So, again, it was our last show, and we talked about the defense because we weighed in on the 18-game season. But anyway, I digress. But Saints camp, some other things. One of the other things, Blake Grupe. 8 for 8 today. Yeah. He looked really good, really sharp. I really did like what I saw from him. The other part that was interesting is that they were working on like fake
like
field
busted
passes busted busted play, pass it to the offensive lineman in the end zone. Like it was just kind of crazy. Like you don't really see that a lot, but at the same time, this is a team like I wrote about is like this is a team who's like at least we're going to try it and practice it, and hopefully they know it when it comes to play. Like not like some teams just don't really know what the rules are, and until they happen and find out the hard way. So
yeah, I will say Lou Hedley much better arm than Matthew Hayball on a one pass to one pass comparison. Much better arm.
Yeah, a little bit. Sorry, Matt. But and Hedley had he had an okay day. So they were working on punts at the 35-yard line from their own 35, and so he started strong, but then he hit like three, like a couple of shanks and wobblers and stuff. Rebounded late, had one of the best punts, but I mean, really, what we got with him was like 40 to 50 yards. That was kind of what we were looking for, but the hang time was okay on that aspect. Special teams is obviously going to play a big part in things, and we know that it could shape out the final roster. But anything that you saw from special teams today that may have stood out or may have just kind of caught your eye?
Yeah, we saw Mac McCain, we saw Bub Means, we saw JT Gray, who was the other one? Miller Bradford, and a few others all play gunner. So that was cool to see that rotation. Oh, the other ones were Equanimity St. Brown and Stanley Morgan. Yeah, Stanley Morgan.
Yep,
and then we also saw Jordan Houghton playing some punt protector, some personal protector over on the punt block or over on the punting team. So that was cool to see as well.
Cool. Yeah, no, I agree. I'm just going through some notes that I have. Let's see.
I should say too, Greg Grupe's distances on those kicks were typically like extra point to 34. So they kind of stayed in a pretty like hugged up kind of range. But again, first day of practice, that makes sense. Like kick those short ones, get comfortable, and then start to move back. Yeah.
Some other notes that I just have that we just haven't covered because again, it's it's just the first day. We're gonna have plenty of stuff to talk about, but Dallin Holker, we knew he would probably run with the first team. Definitely ran primarily with the first team. That was good to see. I mentioned Jalen Ford running a little bit with that first team. That was another one that we looked at that I liked. The Jay Kendre was ahead of Spencer Rattler. That was another good one. Charted all the quarterbacks. Carr was 4 of 5 today with a pick. Kendre was 2 of 3. Rattler was 0 of 3. He had one of his passes that were dropped. And just a caveat, not that matters, but and Peterman was 1 of 1. Let's see what else do I have on here. I'm just saying, we start everything. Gosh, please stop.
The first song of the day was Kendrick's "Not Like Us."
True.
So
you are charting.
I wrote that. So. I wrote that down, and we also heard one other diss track, and it was Kendrick 2 Drake 0 yet again. So tracking that as well.
I'm surprised they didn't lead off with California Love. I got to be honest.
Yeah, they didn't have any. They didn't have any of those like California centric songs.
Yeah, you could have, but it's all good. But
yeah,
man, day one, quite a lot to see. And of course, if you haven't seen everything, go on Second and Saints. We got all the interviews up. Go to Saints News Network. Ross wrote about Alvin Kamara wanting to retire as a Saint, and then I wrote about practice recaps, and there's plenty more to come from training camp. So, but Ross, what else you got for training camp? Because I feel like we covered most everything from the day of practice that is relevant. And of course, if anybody has questions before we do decide to get out of here, feel free to ask them.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just keeping up with everything every day. John and I, we have a lot of fun working together out there. And so it's always a ton of fun to be able to go out there and make it all happen. And so that's been fun. And then just mostly doing like a couple of shows a day over at Locked On Saints. Make sure you've got everything you need. We'll be doing our show constantly over here on Second and Saints as well. And then continue to write stuff up over at Saints News Network. There is the new URL, by the way. Instead of having to go to si.com/NFL/Saints, you can now just go to saintssi.com. Thank goodness. And you will be able to be directed to Saints News Network, where you can find everything. A little bit more of a convenient pathway for you there at saintssi.com. So definitely worth checking out. What about you, bud?
I mean, look, I did all my special teams, or not special, all my position previews for training camp. So if you want to know what the battles are, the biggest storylines of camp, who I think is going to make the final roster, the wild cards for each position, I have all those up on Saints News Network. to go check out any position that you want to know about. That's the biggest thing that I just finished up and wrapped up. But of course, it's training camp. So all the big stories, all the big storylines we're following. There's so many things that we're looking for at training camp. And of course, if you're not watching Locked On, if you're not reading our practice notes, if you're not checking what we're doing on all the social media stuff, I'm telling you, we try to make you feel like we're there, or like you're there. Like we're there, like you're there, and make sure that you know what we know, right? And so if you have players that you want us to look at some days, I can't say that we'll always hone in on the undrafted rookie that, may not play but a snap or two, but we can definitely hone in on everybody. We try to at least notice everybody, and there's a good group, a good media group that we help each other and all that other fun stuff. So, but just trucking along, man. So, make sure you subscribe to Second and Saints. Hit the notification button. A lot of cool things are coming around the corner for us. I mentioned sponsorship with FOCO. They're definitely a sponsor of today's show. Go to the link. It's in the description. You can get 10% off with the code SNN10. Maybe I'll realize how to talk. You know what? I'm still jet lagged. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So
there you go. You're still jet lagged.
At 4 o'clock in the morning. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning on West Coast time today.
Yeah. I was a 5 a.m.er. this morning. And I was like,
anyway.
I could probably go back to sleep. And I was like, no, I'm staying up. This is the new me for like 2 days. See how it goes.
Yeah. Is the link saintssi.com. That's a good call. And yes, I did get a haircut. I grew it out before and stuff. So thanks for noticing. I had a couple of people say it's like
got your ears lowered.
Yeah, whatever. A little fresh fade and make sure to leave it a little bit longer on top. So I don't know. I got to try different things as I get older. But yeah, man. Well, anything else you want to plug or say before we get out of here, man? I can't believe an hour's already passed. I never can believe it because time just flies when we do this, man. Always.
Crazy. Always fun. Nah, man, I'm good. I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
All right. Well, hi, Chase, but bye because we're about to get out of here. So that's going to do it for us on Second Saints. On Ross Jackson, I'm John Hendrix. Don't forget to tune in. We will be here every day that Saints practice. We'll try to get you a proper schedule. The only thing, the foreseeable future is they don't practice on Sunday, if I'm right. But you can expect a show tomorrow, on Thursday, on Friday, and on Saturday. And we'll see what happens on Sunday. We might actually enjoy the day off, but we'll see. But that's going to do it for us. Appreciate you guys as always. All of your support. You guys mean the world to us. Appreciate you so much. Can't say that enough. And taking some time out of your day to listen to us two ramble on and act like idiots. So appreciate it for sure. Thanks, guys. Y'all have a good one. We will talk at you tomorrow. Appreciate it.